the comment was very valid. We hope that there will be a process and a transparent process for replacing deferred, delayed, and removed projects back in to the 10-year plan, and it's well conceived and prudent. I think one of the comments was that the I-93 delays that are going on at exit 2 and 3, I think,
Right.
Maybe those aren't top on that list because maybe we don't have a clear enough picture of where the federal funding is yet, unless we get a long-term reauthorization. And we don't want to take on that debt service unless we have a good sense for that. To be sure, these are extremely difficult economic times, and they require very difficult choices. I strongly believe that the New Hampshire that New Hampshire residents do not understand the impacts of what is being proposed. I strongly believe that if they knew that $30 vehicle registration surcharge would be less than they will pay for the preventative maintenance that they're going to have, unscheduled preventative maintenance that they're going to have to do on their vehicle because we cannot maintain our roads appropriately. It's far cheaper to pay the $30. We're really seemingly only looking at one side of the picture. We're looking at the expense side. We have to, as a state, tackle the challenge of looking at the revenue side as well. It just does not make sense otherwise, and somebody has to lead us in that endeavor so that we don't blindside the general public and truly stifle our struggling economy. I closed last night with 3 questions, and I'll close tonight with the same 3. And they are, first, will the general public be provided with a summary of the general consensus of the comments provided to this plan? Second, what are the governor and executive council going to do to demonstrate and validate that our comments are highly valued? And third, how will the governor and executive council lead the state as our transportation network and economic growth are potentially jeopardized by the lack of fortitude to tackle truly tough decisions and talk about raising revenues that are essential right now? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to stay on the same topic, presumably there's somebody else from Coast. Is there somebody else from Coast who's going to speak? So why don't we have you next? That way we can stay on the same topic.
This one's my height. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity, and my name is Diane Smith, and I do work with Coast, but my role here tonight is to represent ACT, the Alliance for Community Transportation, and I'm here to follow up on a letter that was presented to New Hampshire DOT on October 14th, and I believe, Councilor, that you got a copy of that letter, to restore the ability in the 10-year plan for the flexing of highway or STP funds to a transit program that has been done in the past by through the 10-year plan historically. That opportunity is not in the existing proposed draft 10-year plan, and I'd like to spend a few minutes describing why we think that's important. Historically, as Mr. Cass pointed out, there is little or no support to public transportation in the state of New Hampshire. And unfortunately, over the years, what developed was numerous transportation programs that are provided by human service agencies, and those programs were supported with vehicles through the state of New Hampshire funded with federal dollars. And so throughout New Hampshire there are numerous entities, numerous agencies that operate these publicly funded vehicles. Well, there was an effort that started perhaps 15 years ago in Stratford County, a grassroots effort to begin to discuss coordinating these publicly funded resources to provide additional transportation services throughout the area. And Coast was part of that, but it was also a collaborative effort from a variety of human service agencies in the region. Several years ago, the state of New Hampshire was required to develop a statewide coordination plan, or risk, frankly, losing some other federal transportation dollars. And the state's plan, which I think, frankly, was a good one, was to have an oversight agency, or advisory council, if you will, called the Statewide Coordinating Council, and also then to develop regional entities. The state was carved up into 10 regions, and one of which, of course, is Southeast New Hampshire, 38 communities stretching from the Massachusetts border to the Maine border, and including also the two southernmost Carroll County communities, Wakefield and Brookfield. That 38 community region was then, the Alliance for Community Transportation, or ACT, was then identified by the Statewide Coordinating Council as the Regional Coordinating Council. Frankly, I came on board to help staff that effort and move the effort forward to improve transportation services throughout that region, and to do so largely through the coordination of existing resources and to bring additional resources to enhance transportation services. It's been an interesting and challenging effort, and I'm very pleased to say that we've been successful. We are frequently cited in transit circles as being one of the more progressive regions in terms of achieving some successes with respect to coordinating these publicly funded resources. However, and Mark mentioned one of the projects that's already been started through this, under the guidance of the Alliance for Community Transportation north of Rochester, to bring elderly and disabled into the Rochester area for shopping, for access to pharmacy and grocery shopping. But I will say that the catalyst for coordination, which we do anticipate will start in earnest this winter, later this fall and this winter, is this funding that was established, was created and made available by flexing of the highway funds to this special, or this, I shouldn't say special, it's a Federal Transit Administration program that supports services to the elderly and the disabled. State of New Hampshire is making that available to all the regions in the state, and in this particular region, because of its demographics, was awarded the largest sum of funding for that effort, $135,000. And we're putting it to work throughout that region, both Rockingham County efforts and Stratford County efforts. And in Stratford County, it will be used on the first phase to introduce service to communities that have none whatsoever, particularly the more rural communities, and also support transportation services to the Community Health Center in Somersworth for elderly and disabled who have no other access to that facility, even though it is on a coast bus route, and many folks do use the bus to access that new center. Unfortunately, many of their customers and clients are outside of the bus route area, and this will help support those services. This effort is important to the region. It's a catalyst for it's important in terms of just the services in and of themselves, but it sets the framework, it establishes the relationships amongst the different service providers, and it is our intention to use those service providers that already have these publicly funded vehicles in the community. So it really is not only a collaborative effort, but it's now going to be a coordinated effort. And these funds are instrumental in getting that off the ground and continuing it in the future. And we certainly hope that the 10-year plan will allow future flexing of those STP funds to continue this effort in the future.
Thank you very much. I just want to mention the Governing Council. We met at the Goodwin Center a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago now. Very nice facility, and so I know they mentioned their partnerships in the community, and they even mentioned transportation of the elderly and those in need to access their services. Is there anybody else from Coast?
I'll try to be brief since I've been preceded by two others. Good evening. My name is Jeremy LaRose. I'm the Manager of Operations and Planning for Coast, a resident of Dover. First, I'd like to start by commending DOT for having to make some difficult choices. When you're talking about reductions in funding, I think we've taken the right direction in terms of maintenance. It is very important. As Rad mentioned, having an infrastructure that we can use is more important than expanding into new areas. But I think that underlines my key point this evening. We have a lot of internal discussions at Coast about how do we frame our message. Coast is doing great work, and sometimes we worry amongst ourselves if we're doing so great and we can come to meetings like this and say, look at how great we're doing. How do we convince people that we need more money? Well, if you're doing so well, what do you need more money for? But I think we need to take a look at history as something that's very important to me. The challenges of funding are not new. The challenges of public transit are not new. With all the expansion projects that we're talking about at Coast, about expanding commuter services to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and to the Pease Air Force Base, we are reestablishing services that were in existence, that people depended on in the 80s when Coast was formed. Those services have gone away. And when you talk to people who are excited about these services coming back and you say, well, this used to exist, they ask me that question, well, why did it go away? And we're struggling today to find money to put service back in place that was in existence in the mid-80s. We are today at Coast just getting service back on some roads and in some towns that existed in the 1900s. And here, 110 years later, we are reestablishing some of those services. And people say, oh, great, this is a new service, it's very exciting. And I find that very personally frustrating. It's something that I'm very passionate about because I find it exciting to design and develop new services and ways to help people. But like I said, it's similarly frustrating that we're really only repeating history. We're starting to put services back on the street that were there. And we still face the same issue. Those services went away because funding disappeared. And when funding disappears, you have to work twice as hard to get the service back on the street. It costs more money when you do it later, and maintenance is the key. Maintaining our system, whether it's the road or the transit system, is crucial. And I think Rad is absolutely right. It's time for everybody, and NHDOT is doing their best given the forecast, but it's time for everybody to understand that revenue is a key component of maintaining the system and being able to upkeep what we have and not projecting cuts. I understand that that's very unpopular politically, but somebody needs to begin that conversation. If it doesn't start now, then this becomes another chapter in our history in which 20 years from now a young man would be standing in front of a room of people talking about how excited he is to put service back on the street that existed before he was born. And finally, I think most importantly, as each of us have stood up here to speak tonight, it's important for our legislative friends in the room to understand that we're not representing just Coast. I'm representing everybody who is on the bus every day, the thousands of people that we carry at Coast, the thousands of accomplishments that we've made in the 30 years of history at Coast,